The elite Bilderberg meeting took place this past week. It saw the gathering of some of the world's most powerful figures to discuss political, financial, technological, and business matters.
Here to tell us more about what might have gone down at the three-day summit is the editor of the Grayzone, Max Blumenthal. Welcome back to Rising, Max.
Good to be back.
Now, Max, for those of us who might not be as familiar with this conference, it is relatively secretive, low-key, off the record. Can you tell us about the origin of it and also who attends these things?
Well, this conference is really a forum for the transatlantic elite and for maintaining U.S. dominance over the European continent. It was founded in 1954 at a period of anxiety in Europe about the resurgence of communism, anti-Americanism, and the oldest attendee there, who's been going since 1957 and who is there this year, is Henry Kissinger. So that should tell you a lot. It's low-key because the location is always kept secret. It's up to independent, scrappy journalists to find the location. And it was a Portuguese journalist, I think his name is Henrique Carvalho, who's written a book about Bilderberg, who found this year's location, which was at Pestana Palace, a very ritzy location in Lisbon. And only about 4 reporters were outside, which really tells you a lot about the Western international correspondents who actually attended this meeting. You had the editor-in-chief of The Economist. You had the chief foreign policy correspondent for Financial Times, Gideon Rachman, inside the building with 3 current prime ministers, several former heads of state in Europe, the EU commissioner, the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, a who's who of big oil chieftains, the 21st richest man in America, Ken Griffin, the vulture capitalist, and AI barons, Sam Altman, Eric Schmidt, Peter Thiel, and these journalists have sworn to an oath of secrecy, to Chatham House rules, to keep completely off the record what took place inside. And what takes place inside these meetings is extremely momentous. I mean, consider the fact that you've had Sanna Marin, the Finnish prime minister, a young figure who's a pet project of the World Economic Forum and all these powerful interests, and she was in the room with Jens Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, last year, and then subsequently applies for NATO membership. What's happening with Sweden? Well, the Swedish former prime minister, Magdalena Andersson, refused to tell an independent reporter, Josh Friedman, anything about Sweden's bid for NATO membership. So what we're talking about here is secrecy, a lack of accountability, and anti-democratic tendencies of the transatlantic elite.
So the Bilderberg Group is something that has come under criticism from, what I would describe as more fringe voices like Alex Jones, Lyndon LaRouche, et cetera. That's often used, I think, as a way for to shut down a conversation about what's going on there and the policies being discussed there, because people will say, oh no, being curious about this is some hobby horse of conspiracy theorist type people, so we don't need to take it seriously. But it sounds like you're saying that, well, set aside whatever those people are saying, there is a legitimate area of inquiry to the kinds of conversations they're having, and that it does affect policy in Europe, in the U.S., and elsewhere.
Yeah, the journalists, the 4 scrappy independent journalists who were there this year, and I was there last year because it was in Washington, D.C., I'll talk about that in a second, they're asking the questions that the Western press and the Beltway press corps refuses to ask of the people who are shaping history. I'll give you an example. At the airport on the way out of Bilderberg, Radoslaw Sikorski, the former Polish foreign minister, who is the husband of neoconservative pundit Anne Applebaum, who celebrated the Nord Stream sabotage, the worst act of industrial sabotage in history, a history-shaping event. He celebrated it by thanking the United States on Twitter. He was caught at the airport by Josh Friedman, one of these independent reporters, and he asked him about that tweet and the Nord Stream attack, and Sikorski refused to answer. And what you have are heads of state and corporate titans, or the foreign minister of Ukraine, who is in attendance, refusing to answer questions about what they're discussing. And this is where history is being shaped. So it isn't a conspiracy. It's actually something that the congressional record has been reporting on since 1971. But as you said, Robbie, Alex Jones and because he was once one of these independent reporters hounding the Bilderberg group, is always put up to deflect from the reality of this conference and the complete lack of accountability and the anti-democratic nature of its attendees who claim to be fighting for democracy in Ukraine.
Yeah, Max, I mean, I really take your point. There is this question of why go through the hassle of having this, conference with so many people in one place that is attracting, at least because of your excellent reporting and the reporting of the reporter in Portugal now, is becoming increasingly highlighted among independent journalists. When it seems like, if they want to make a deal with Sweden and NATO, if they want to have these side conversations and these kind of machinations, it's possible to do that in a way that's completely off the record without attracting the scrutiny of any gumshoe journalists. What do you think the real core objective is of this conference being structured in this way, having this big meetup of people on an annual basis?
Well, you said it, Brianna. That's the point, in my view. Let's get the public, that nasty little group of people who see us as out of touch, unaccountable, and warlike, and possibly even demonic elites out of the way, so we can get down to business. And so imagine if you're Ken Griffin and you're looking to get ahead of the curve on investments, and you're talking to the head of NATO and several prime ministers, along with, I don't know, Elizabeth Economy at the Commerce Department, who's overseeing the great power competition with China for the Biden administration. And I don't know, there's the head of CISA there as well, this censorship division of the Department of Homeland Security. Well, insider trading's supposedly outlawed, but if you're Ken Griffin, you're going to get a geopolitical edge and know what to invest in next. And that's not to mention the discussion of AI, which probably took place at Bilderberg, which is terrifying.
And you said you were there you were in D.C. when it was there, so you got an ability to see a little bit more up close the kinds of things being discussed. Talk about that, and talk to me about, I'm so interested in how misinformation has come to, the concerns about that has come to dominate elites. Saw that as a central theme at the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos. The obsession with controlling the narrative that these elites feel is like the most important issue to them. Do you see some of that at Bilderberg as well?
Well, these transatlantic figures, first of all, they use the term democracy as a stand-in for the establishment they represent. And anything that challenges that establishment is a threat to democracy. And the noise that we're currently making now, which is spitting factual journalism, is to them disinformation because it contravenes the objective of this transatlantic elite. So they're obsessed with disinformation. They're fearful of the public, and these meetings are designed to provide them with a forum to interact and plan without those nasty little interferences and scrutiny. And I mean, last year, the Pfizer CEO, Albert Bourla, held a obviously off the record secret meeting with world leaders and industry heads on the next pandemic. I mean, how frightening is that the public cannot know what was discussed when we are going to have to live through whatever lockstep plan they put into place? It's no wonder people are conspiratorial. So what I did last year, Robbie, is I just walked right up to the front of the Mandarin Hotel after determining that it was the place by calling around five-star hotels in Washington. They were acting shady there, so I figured that was the place. Got there, it was blocked off. There were men in dark suits outside, and I tried to walk right into the hotel, and I was pounced on by executive security. I filmed it. I just wanted to show the public how secretive and securitized this meeting was, and the security was military grade for the Pestana Palace this year in Portugal.
And has there been any mainstream media traction in response to your reporting efforts last year or the reporting efforts this year out of Portugal? Or, when you take these kind of videos to them, is there just a continued media blackout and an unwillingness to show any concern or any curiosity about what's going on inside?
You have to admire the discipline of the Western corporate media in not reporting on this, the same way that they so avoid investigating the Nord Stream pipeline explosion, for example. They seem totally disinterested in this. The Guardian had one article, and that's the only thing I can find in mainstream media. The Indian media, however, was very interested because there was a session on India, which really speaks to the anxiety of the transatlantic elite, because India has bought Russian oil at 10 times the rate that it did in 2021. In 2022, it's refining that oil, and you have the head of BP at this meeting, someone who's on the board of Chevron, who serves in the House of Lords in the UK. They're obviously not happy that Russia is still able to sell oil on the international market because they want to corner the market. So the world is watching, but the Western press is studiously turning away, if not sending its own reporters into these off-the-record meetings.
Max Blumenthal, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.